Welcome to Engaged Company Culture, a podcast directed at you, helping you to stop the employee exodus in your organization. This podcast has 3 different types of episodes. First, you have tips, tricks, observations, stories, research from me, Dr. Catherine Weiberg of Profitable Alignment. Second, interviews with other consultants, other coaches who are here to serve you so you can learn other tips and tricks to engaging your employees, to stop the employee exodus, to consciously create and continue a company culture where people want to be and where they encourage other people to come to work and to become your customers. Third, I interview other business leaders who have engaged company cultures and want to share their stories. You might learn from them how they have applied principles of company culture to increase their employee retention, increase their profits, increase their productivity, and increase everyone's job satisfaction. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Welcome to today's episode of Engaged Company Culture. My guest today is award-winning international speaker and author on leadership and organizational development, Dave Mitchell, the president of Leadership Difference. In fact, some of the books that he has written are The Power of Understanding People, The Power of Understanding Yourself, and his most recent book is Peak Performance Culture. He's going to hold it up for us so everybody can see it. Those who are listening audio only, you can find it on Amazon, and his Amazon links are in the show notes. I met Dave at a local event here in Walla Walla, got to hear him speak, had the opportunity to take his Power of Understanding People assessment, thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm excited to share Dave with you today. Dave, welcome to Engaged Company Culture.
It's my pleasure to be here, Dr. Catherine.
You have done much. In fact, you have worked with over 400,000 people attending your enter-train-ment seminars. I love that you have that coined word of enter-train-ment. And I have to admit, I was entertained as well as I was learning from you. I would love to have people understand your path to your current work, if you're willing to share that with us.
Oh gosh, it's certainly a long and winding road, as the Beatles would say. My joke is always that I truly wanted to be a professional baseball player. It wasn't one of those like you're 6 years old and you want to be a fireman or a professional baseball player. I pursued it into college, and it was there that the coaching staff discovered a large lack of talent, which ended that dream. So I went into broadcasting for a little while, worked for CBS News as a producer and reporter. But didn't really enjoy it. It wasn't my passion. So I kind of just floated around for a little bit. I was working as a customer service representative for Marshall Field's, which is kind of a Nordstrom's level high-end retail department store back in the day. And they were the first ones to say, hey, your background in communications and related topics might make you a good trainer. Would you be interested in going into training? And I think the full consideration of that request by them was, what does it pay? If it pays more than I'm making now, sure, let's go, let's try training. And it turns out I loved it. I realized that I loved being an educator. I loved the transfer of learning. I loved the performance elements of it, quite frankly, as well. And then for the next 12 years, I kind of bounced back and forth from learning and development function to generalist functions in human resources. And, as you move your way up the organizational charts, And I always loved the training part and tolerated the HR part. When I was in HR jobs, I'm like, oh, this is fine. And this makes me more money and makes me more promotable, but I really missed the classroom. So finally, in 1995, I was the Vice President of Human Resources and Quality for the Buena Vista Hospitality Group, which was a strategic partner with Walt Disney World. I took the plunge. I said, I'm just going to see if I can do this training thing as an entrepreneur and bring leadership courses and communication courses to, at that time, I thought I would just be working with small and medium-sized companies that couldn't really afford a high level of leadership development on staff, and they would outsource that to me. Over time, I worked increasingly more with large international companies. And so over the last 28 years, I've worked in all industries with all types of sized organizations, primarily on communication related things, leadership, certainly customer service, selling skills, just team dynamics. I get a lot of emails, Dr. Catherine, from people that want to understand their spouse better. They send me that same assessment you took and said, what does this mean about my husband? And so there's like a dabbling of marriage counseling mixed in there. Yeah, it's exactly. But I feel very fortunate. I was just wired to kind of find my passion and had some breaks along the way and good fortune, and allowed me to be able to do exactly what I want to do. And I think, for those of us that get that blessing, that's one of the greatest things you can have in life. And so precious few people actually get that. So I never want to lose track of how lucky I am to be able to do it.
Thank you. I absolutely love your path. And of course, you had to start with a joke where you talk about they discovered your lack of talent, because you're all about entertaining as well as training. I love that you chose your path. And you mentioned that not everybody does. One of the things that I'm trying to help people do is enjoy their work and find joy in their work. I would love to know, how would you encourage people to succeed with that perspective?
Yeah, it's funny. I think a lot of us, and I say us people that are responsible for coaching and motivation and education, all related to improvement of teams, improvement of self, improvement of others. We throw that out pretty cavalierly, right? It's like, you need to find your dream, you need to find your passion. And I don't think it is as easy as we make it sometimes seem. So there's this term that is rarely used, but I think it's so important to know about, and it's called metacognition. And it's an education term, and it's knowing, it's thinking about how you think. And in education, it's used to kind of do curriculum development and try to figure out how do I frame this information so it's easier for people to grasp and understand and apply. But another application of that term is looking inward, and really, it's more than self-awareness, Dr. Catherine. It's like, I call it self-awareness on steroids. It's like, not only am I self-aware, but I am actively strategizing how to take that awareness and improve myself. How do I use this knowledge of myself to be better? And I think in this noisy world, there are so many distractions, and I find myself guilty of this, where, I'm like, if my phone is not where it's supposed to be, there's an anxiety. I'm like, oh my God, where's my phone? We're so connected to distractions in our life that we don't take time to really think about ourselves, think about, am I happy? Am I not happy? Why am I happy? And how do I do that more often? Why am I not happy? And how do I change that? What am I doing that's productive for people and myself? And how do I do that more? What am I doing that is not productive for other people and hurting relationships? And how do I change that? We don't engage in that nearly enough. And another blessing that I got, and it comes from an unusual place, there was some, I was an unplanned child. My sister was 18 years older than me. At least it was unplanned from my mother's standpoint. I'm not sure. I think my dad might have been doing some clandestine planning on this. But I just came along at a really bad time. And so while my mother was going through a lot of things when I was growing up, it was best for me to maybe just vacate the house, even at a fairly young age. So I spent a lot of time walking through the woods with my dog Red, alone with my thoughts. And I think what could have certainly been a real toxic experience early in my life actually was a really positive one, because it really taught me contemplation and self-evaluation and metacognition and thinking about things. And what I've come to realize is that's a skill that not everybody possesses. So, they didn't have situations that kind of force that on them. So they've never developed that ability to do that. So, when I wrote the book, The Power of Understanding People, it was to help people understand others. But what I realized after I wrote that book is most of the time after I would deliver the seminar, people would come up with their assessment and say, what does this say about me? And I thought, oh, crap, I'm working on people to figure out others when they haven't actually figured themselves out that much. So the book after The Power of Understanding People was The Power of Understanding Yourself. And that is a framework for doing some self-exploration and some deeper self-exploration, because until you really understand that, I think it's hard for you to explore the world and figure out what your passion is, because you got to first have a good orientation towards yourself and then go explore the world. Otherwise, the world can just chew you up. There's so many distractions and so much noise, and it happens so fast. I mean, people wake up and they're 50 years old and they're like, I don't even like this job. Why have I done this job for the last 10, 20, 30 years? And it's because they never really took a moment and said, is this what I want to do my whole life? Is this how I want to spend the bulk of my conscious time? So yeah, that whole self-reflection, metacognition, learning those skills, to me, the earlier that you learn how to do that and the earlier you start plotting out a journey, and still it's going to be hard. Even if this is my passion, this is what I want to do. I talk to people every week that this is what I want to do, this is what I want to pursue, but here's the problem: I'm not making any money. It's like, well, yeah. I mean, life doesn't say, oh, good for you. All right, here it is. There's your path. There's your goal. There'll be money along the way. Have a nice trip. No, I always say life's a honey badger. It doesn't give a hoot. You're going to have to navigate that on your way. And some people get real lucky, and the honey badger doesn't bother them. But others, it seems like they just got honey badger, attraction pheromones, and they step in and honey badger doo-doo every step of the way. So it takes commitment, but it also takes self-evaluation. And I think if you have both of those things, then you can identify your passion and live a life that way. But one you have more control over than the other. I can find my passion, but I can't necessarily control the honey badger. That's the bigger fight.
Thank you. That was fantastic. Everything that you were talking about, I had all of my neurons firing, because I was thinking about how your description of metacognition and how everything about really understanding ourselves just aligns with everything that I share with people. I teach appreciative intelligence so that people can understand their own strengths and understand the strengths of the people around them, so that they can then look at the opportunities, their aspirations, the results they've gotten to today and the results they want to get, and then reframe their past experiences and even their present perceptions, look at them in a new way, so they can rewrite today's status quo and redesign their future. That all ties into the metacognition that you were describing as well. It's right. Understanding who you are, so that as you understand others, you can build the complementary teams and really step into your passion. I tell my kids, I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up until I was in my 40s. And it still changes sometimes.
Yeah, oh, exactly. I'm still holding out some hope that the Mets are going to call and say, you know, we've decided that we're going to move our organization in a new direction, and we're going to put a 62-year-old failed college first baseman in the big leagues. I still sometimes have that hope. I'm not giving up.
I am sure that they could find a way to use your metacognition and your power of understanding, as well as your culture approach, and get you into a Mets uniform.
That's right. I'd be a great teammate. I would not help them win anything, but we would be a stronger collective unit, maybe. I don't know.
Oh,
But back to
just not on the field.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in fact, historically, that was always the best place for me, was not on the field. But anyway, but you said a couple of things that are really so true. I think we're all impatient for it to happen too, and sometimes we have to just recognize that this is a journey that we don't know how long it is. We know or at least we think we know the destination, but we don't know how long the path is. And we get really impatient because once we know or think we know the destination, then the journey becomes irritating. But as we learn throughout life, there is really no identified destination. There's one in your mind, but it's just a northern light to move the journey, right? The journey's the point, not the destination. You never, probably ever arrive at the true destination, but the journey is the right one.
And every time you reach a destination, you have a tendency to look for the next destination. Therefore, enjoying the journey, celebrating when you reach each destination, enjoying the journey, and applying that metacognition and that appreciative intelligence to understand, this is what got me here. How can I get more of it?
Exactly. And one of the things I talk about all the time, whether it's leadership development or customer service or selling skills, I think it's important for us always to remember we're all delusional. We're all living in our own private Idaho, right? The world that I conjure up is different than the world that you conjure up and everybody else of the nearly 8 billion people on this planet. So, and when you look at it that way, that, the reality that I'm experiencing is largely the one that I just created. It's a created reality that I live in. Then it's kind of liberating because, you have so much more control over the reality that you're living than you realize. So I like to say, we're all delusional, might as well make it a good one.
There you go.
We all know that coworker, that Eeyore, that's like, I always say they could win the lottery and they'd come to work and complain about the taxes. And it's just, we have choices about whether we want to be happy or miserable. And it may be easier for some to choose happiness over the other, but it's always still a choice, with the exception of, legitimate mental health challenges. But that's a thing that I have to remind myself from time to time, because we all have those days where we're a little woe is me. And I'll never forget my father with some of the best advice he ever gave me when I wanted the Chuck Taylor Converse All-Star tennis shoes. And I came home and I asked for the $25 from my dad, and he said no. And I was so disappointed, and he looked at me and said, "Cheer up, it gets worse."
Oh my.
And I tell you what, it's the best advice, because those days where you're like so obsessed about something at work, or a squabble with your spouse, or the kids were particularly hard to get out the door today, there'll be a day in the future that you'll say, my God, I'd love to have that day back compared to what I'm dealing with today. So to lose a day because you're upset about something that in the big scheme of things is so insignificant, that's criminal. Don't do that. I know there's all books about gratitude and The Secret and all this stuff, but it really does kind of come down to stay on the sunny side as much as you can. Define your world by the good parts, not by the few irritants that you might have.
Well, and I'm in the habit of turning phrases on their ear. So when you say, cheer up, it's going to get worse, first, of course, I laughed. My second, well, down my train of thoughts, one of my other thoughts was, if you look at it and say, cheer up, it's going to get worse, it's a reminder also that if you stay there, it will get worse.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
you hate your reality. So
Yep.
cheer up, or it will get worse, or cheer up, exclamation point, it will get
Right.
worse. It's both the same thing. Recognize
Exactly.
you create your reality. If you're going to be delusional, create delusions of grandeur and step into them.
Right. You're right. Yeah. I mean, I grew up in a rural community in the Midwest, and nobody had money, but we didn't know we didn't have money because this was the only economy we lived in, right? But even in those economies, there's really, really poor people, and then there's people that are doing fine relative to the economy they're in. And you know, my dad taught me to appreciate what you have. You know, he would say things like, I used to worry about my shoes until I met the man with no legs. Right. And, you know, as growing up, I thought, do you have any advice that's not like a cliche or something that came out of a fortune cookie? But as I've gotten older, I realized, you know, cliches linger and have staying power because they capture things that are universal truths. Right. So,
Exactly.
yeah. And one of the, here's another shameless plug for my current book, but in all four of my books, also, you know, shamelessly positioned where everybody can see them, I talk about internal locus of control, because when you call your company the leadership difference, it just begs people to say, so what's the difference? And I say, well, you know, a good argument could be made for internal locus of control, which are the people that say, look, it's my life, it's my delusion, it's my world. No one is going to make this happen for me but me. The honey badger doesn't care. So I've got to take what the honey badger gives me, and I got to figure out what to do with that. No one's going to come save me. No one's going to come advocate for me. Yes, there will be resources along the way. There'll be people that I nurture relationships with. But at the end of the day, my life is my responsibility. And no matter how crappy my luck is, I've got to figure out a way to make it work. And people that think that way inevitably are more happy, more successful, because they don't wallow around in the victimhood of life. They say, well, drag that happened, bummer. I'm going to maybe lose an hour or two or a day to kind of ruminating on the bad fortune of it all. But at some point, I'm going to say, all right, well, now I've got to get to work. I've got to do what I need to do to get this back on track. Those are the people that you hire. If you're a business owner or a leader, those are the people that you educate if you're an educator. And those are the people you raise if you're a parent, as much as you can.
Brilliant. That actually gives a great segue as you're talking about our locus of control and how we want to be the person with that locus of control recognition, as well as we want to hire them and surround ourselves with them and train them up. So with all of that and all that you've done since, I was going to say since 1995, but perhaps even before, what is your favorite professional project?
Oh gosh, you know, that's like asking me which of my two kids do I like the best, or what's one attribute of my lovely bride that I most admire. I mean, that's a hard thing to pick, but let's just go with current projects, because after 28 years as an entrepreneur and then 12 years before that as a corporate participant, that's all kind of blurry at this point. So let's just focus on what I deal with now.
Excellent.
There's probably two things that would come to mind. So one's a little in the weeds, one's a little geeky, and one's a little more straightforward. So I'll start with the geeky one first. I like organizational development work, and I know this is your bailiwick, just because I think I like it because it's hard. And it creates so many revelations among your client that, the fix for this isn't isn't easy and isn't something you can just buy, or isn't something that you can just, tomorrow I'm going to do this and that'll fix it. It's systemic, and it's long, and it's arduous. And the bigger the organization and the more complicated the organization, the more arduous and lengthy this is going to be. I have a international pharmaceutical company who's been a client of mine for the last 3.5 years, who had they had a core ideology of customer centricity. So without getting too in the weeds here, most pharmaceutical companies don't provide services to the consumer. They provide services to other pharmaceutical companies. So they might do research and development for Johnson & Johnson, or they might do FDA regulatory work for Novartis, or they might do manufacturing and packaging and distribution for Moderna. We kind of get a glimpse into that when the COVID vaccine came out, and we started hearing all these names, and we heard Moderna, and we heard I think Johnson & Johnson, but yet the people that were distributing this were completely different companies. And it's like, oh, wait, I thought this was this. Well, that's because logistically someone else handles all that. Anyway, bottom line is, pharmaceutical is a very complicated, multi-layered industry. So when they say they're customer-centric, that means this particular company wanted to make the pharma companies that they serve happy. And then 3.5 years ago, the CEO said, we're going to adjust that to patient centricity. Now, what's interesting is that company doesn't have any patients, theoretically. They deliver products and services to other pharmaceutical companies who have patients. But, and you can make the argument, no pharmaceutical company has a patient because that's the doctor and they just provide resources. But the point is, it seemed like a very small adjustment. You know, instead of our customers, we're going to look at the end user. We're going to look at the Dr. Catherines and the Dave Mitchells of the world and make sure that our work is serving them. Well, that little adjustment, we're now 3.5 years in with patient centricity, patient awareness councils, all these patient-centric activities, educating the employees about how these drugs and their work affects the lives of human beings, discovering actual employees in this multinational Indian pharmaceutical company who are benefiting by the drugs made at another site in that same company that they had no idea. So we have employees who are taking a drug that's keeping them alive that was made at another site in the same company, but in another part of the world. And installing this has created so much more pride and enthusiasm and appreciation of the role and the importance of their role in the lives of other people. So all of a sudden, guys that I drove a forklift in the warehouse. I just moved this pallet from here to put it on a truck, and that's what I do. No, you don't. You help get life-saving drugs out of the warehouse and into a pharmacy where the person who needs them can access them. And if you didn't do that, they would die. Well, that's a whole different level of importance to this job, right? Moving a pallet from point A onto a truck, whatever. Making sure this stuff on this pallet gets to a pharmacy because someone's going to die, somebody's mother, someone's father, someone's child, someone's grandma is going to die if that doesn't get out today. That's a whole different level of importance. So that's been a huge, and they've seen it in the level of employee engagement and the feedback and the recognition that what I thought was a nominal, fairly unimportant job is actually a really important job. And I imagine these people at parties, when people say, hey, what do you do? They say, I'm a forklift driver at this company. Now they can say, you know, I'm part of a group that provides life-saving medication for people around the world. I mean, that's a whole different way to frame what you do for a living. So I love that project. The other thing, which is a more visceral and immediate thing, after the pandemic, I think we have a global resiliency epidemic. And we've had it for a long time. Stress has been a problem for human beings far before I arrived on the planet, and will probably still be around far after I leave the planet. But it's escalating, and I think it's escalating because of the complexity of our lives and the the amount of noise and distractions. And as we, I'm old enough that I listened to baseball games on the radio. That was the primary way to listen to a baseball game. Otherwise, you're not going to get any baseball until Saturday, because there was the Saturday morning game of the week on TV. So if you wanted to have any baseball in your life before Saturday, you had to listen to it on the radio. Now you can subscribe to every team's games every day via a variety of mechanisms, technology, direct TV. You can go now, you don't even have to watch the game. There's channels that just on football that tell you who's about to score, right? So you got all these updates, or you can watch the Major League Baseball mix. So all the games currently going on. It's analogous for what's happened in just one lifetime, where we've gone from I'm just listening to a baseball game to I can watch every game at the same time, right? And so I think everything about our lives has done that. It used to be I focus on this one thing for the next 3 hours, to I got 24 things happening simultaneously all the time. And so this has just created this erosion, I think, of our defenses, and we have not evolved as rapidly as technology is forcing us to. And there's a lot of problems with stress and duress and integrating all this noise into our lives. And how do I control that? And how do I prioritize that? And take time for metacognition and contemplation. And it all came to the head in the pandemic. Once we all went home and we're in our houses and we're spending time with each other, and we don't have as much noise, and we're like, holy crap, I don't know what to do now. Just watching how training changed during the year when we all went home. Like initially, all my clients contacted me, Dr. Catherine, and they said, we need leadership on how to manage people when they're at home. Like what's the work from home leadership acts? So I tried to develop that curriculum. We talked about that. Within a 3-month time, they're saying, no, what we want now is how do we manage the stress of dealing with work from home? I'm like, okay, good. I love that. 3 months after that, most of my events, because I'm an advanced wine sommelier as well, were wine tasting events. So I told everybody, here's how the pandemic went. How do I work in a global pandemic? How do I manage my stress in a global pandemic? Screw it, I'm just going to get drunk. It was just, it was like a microcosm of how we deal with stress, right? It's like, oh, I'm going to learn how to deal with what's stressing me out. Then I'm going to learn how to be not so stressed out. And then it was just, I'm going to find a coping mechanism because it's all's lost. I can't handle it anyway. So what's the drug that I'm going to take? So I love working with people on resiliency because it tells me the company has a recognition of our people are under a lot of stress and we need to give some care to the caregivers here. But also for me personally, the road to handle stress was was a bumpy ride. So it's also a bit of group therapy for me. When I can lead a session on resiliency, it's I always leave those sessions thinking, oh, wow, I'm not doing that. I used to do that, or I know that's important, but somehow I've stopped doing that and I got to get back to that. Like my wander ponders, as I call them. I grew up taking my dog into the woods to try to work through things. That's my best problem solving tool. That's my best metacognitive tool. And when I get busy and start to get stressed out, I stop doing that. And so that just creates a vicious cycle, right? So those are my two favorites, those big, hairy organizational changes where we're trying to modify our ideology, even ever so slightly, but all the complexities of driving that down through the organization. And some of the simple things like, how do we just help our people ward off the demon committee meetings that happen at 2 a.m., all right? Where you wake up in the middle of the night and say, this would be a good time to review all my flaws and failures, right?
You talk about demon committee meetings in your books and in your speeches, in your trainings. I love that you brought that up right now. I
We all
have
have
to
them.
say, I got so excited. I'm sorry, you were gonna say.
I just said we all have demon committee meetings. I don't care. And the person who seems like they never have them would have more than most. I'll tell you right now.
I would bet you're right. I bet you're exactly right. I love that you looked at those two quote unquote extremes as favorite projects, where it's the individual saying, oh my garbage, how do I deal with this change? To, you know what, dash it all. I'm just gonna
It was just
to the wind. And then looking at the individual and how each individual fits into the mission of the organization. I love that, because you said that this international pharmaceutical company made a small change. The moment you described the change as going from customer centric to patient centric, my thought was, that's not small, that's massive, that's
I know.
gigantic. It's a complete shift in the perspective. It's almost a 180. It's so
Right.
dramatically different. And yet that difference is exactly how somebody who may have not found joy in his or her work suddenly does.
Right.
Because all of a sudden I fit in the mission. I am doing something that impacts other people. I have value. It's every person and every person's skills and every person's abilities, every person's strengths have a place.
Yes.
They all have a place.
They really do. And sadly, I think organizations are guilty very often of not taking the time to frame that for everybody. You know, one of the things I talk about in the book, and when I wrote this book, Peak Performance Culture, it really is the cumulative experiences of my last 28 years. And I thought, my hope was that, you know, I was going to be like a Simon Sinek here. I was going to have nice little sexy TED Talk. Here's the key. And it turns out we're not stupid. We haven't missed keys. We overlook things that are very important, or we minimize things that have much more value than we recognize, because they don't seem that important in the immediate exploration of the process. But if we overlook them, they can cause very derogatory impact, like job descriptions. I mean, I when I do a keynote, and I'm like, you know, we talk about vertical alignment. I know you're familiar with that, given your work. You know, how do I make sure the core ideology is obvious at every point in the organization, broad, individual, group? And I said, there is one thing that you can do that will really help this happen. Write good job descriptions. And in the job description, have a paragraph that explains why this job helps support our core ideology. Why do you help the patient, right?
Yes.
In the case of this one pharmaceutical company. And it's like a Yeti. I mean, when I ask about job descriptions, there's like this, oh yeah, we did that in 1990 when the Americans with Disabilities Act came out, and they're around here somewhere. They're not real documents, obviously. And it's a shame, because a really good job description can help with your hiring, it can help with your training, and it can help with your performance appraisal, right? So if you take the time to do what is, you know, admittedly, you know, a pretty laborious task, putting these job descriptions together, but if you do it and do it well, you solve several problems in your organization. Sexy? Probably not, but foundational to really good vertical alignment, and therefore peak performance culture? Absolutely.
Exactly, because if your people are properly aligned, the profits naturally follow.
Exactly. At least you can say, I am who I say I am. I don't think there's anything worse for an organization to not be who you say you are.
Honestly.
Right? Yeah.
Honestly.
Just like with a human being. When you meet a human being and they say who they are, you immediately start to evaluate them based on their behaviors. You know, how many sayings are there about it doesn't matter what you say, it matters what you do. Judge a
Right.
person by his actions, not by his words, right? So, you know, again, back to the cliches, but they're there for a reason, right? We're looking for alignment. I want to see your behaviors match your words. Same is true about a company. You know, a company is just a collective of human beings. It's nothing magical. It's just there's a bunch of us together. So if we say this is who we are, we darn sure better behave that way. And if we don't, why? And the reason for most of them is we never told people how to behave because we never really told them who we are and why you are part of that.
And all of that is why I started Profitable Alignment, because I looked at it and I said, I've always loved work. And I've spoken to a lot of people who don't, I can't figure that out. But when you talk to them and really understand the organization is made of individuals, you help one individual, you help the organization. You help one individual, you help the team. So let's maybe help two people and help the team. And then it just grows and grows as
Right.
each individual recognizes, oh my goodness, I'm amazing and I don't have to be like everybody else and I contribute. Then that person can look at somebody else and say, oh, you're amazing and we don't have to be the same and you contribute. And this is how we feed the whole organization and how we feed the people that we serve. And it creates a stronger alignment. It creates that opportunity to really lean into who you are and create the organization that you want.
Exactly. Absolutely. Right. And again, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir. So let's assume that we're talking to everybody else who we can't see. But, you know, like carpentry work, when you do carpentry work, you spend a lot of time getting things square in the corner, right? You want that 90-degree angle. And there's I mean, I'm old enough that we actually just use the square to do that. But there's all these tools and all this time is spent making sure that this is precise. Why is that? Because the farther you get away from that corner, the farther any misalignment is going to take you offline, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I always say that if the C-suite level isn't walking the talk, by the time you get down to where the rubber meets the road, which it's another thing I talk about, and it's not popular in the C-suite, but I tell them, look, I could fire all of you and the company would still operate just fine.
Right.
If I fire all of them, meaning the people that are doing the daily work with the customers, you're done today. So you have a lot of authority, C-suite, but you don't have much impact. The impact is all the people doing the work. But they don't have any authority because you don't allow them to make the changes they think are necessary. And you know, sometimes rightfully so, because they don't know all the ramifications of that necessarily. But you need to be in constant contact with these people because they know what's really happening and they assume you do as well. And the reality is you don't know what's really happening unless you're talking to these people all the time. And the analogy I use is it's like if that corner is just a little off, it's not quite 90 degrees, it's like 92 or 87. Well, that may not look like a lot in the corner, but you get to the other side of the house and it's way off. It's feet off now, right? And that's the way alignment works in an organization. You know, it's a small problem if people at the entry level are a little offline. That's an easy fix. I can fix that. It's not a big deal. But if the leadership of the organization is offline, well, you got no shot by the time you get to where the impact happens with the customer because the people are so spread out and have so many interpretations of what this is supposed to be because of how far off we started, right? So
it gets frightening. That's the perfect example. And another analogy I've heard frequently in my life that goes along with your carpentry is if an airplane is off by 1 degree, it ends up in a completely different destination. It could even back itself into a volcano or a mountain when it expected to land on a
exactly.
nice plateaued island.
Thought
Because
I was going to Aruba, but unfortunately we're in Nova Scotia. My bad. I was off by a degree there. I'll fix that next time.
exactly, exactly. Now, Dave, for people who have been listening or watching, what's the best way for them to reach you?
My website is www.theleadershipdifference.com. I still do the 3 W's, even though my kids make fun of me. It's like, that's kind of assumed, Dad, but I still do it. Theleadershipdifference.com. You can email me at dave@theleadershipdifference.com. Those are probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. I do travel a lot, so the phone is actually not as efficient as emails are typically for me. And there's lots of information on the website, including for people that are uninterested in, I don't really want to improve my organization, I don't want to improve myself, but I would like to drink some wine. There is a section just on wine that you can go to on the on the website, because I recognize, look, some people have just given up. I get it. You gave up. That's all right. Let's make the give up stage as good as possible. Here's some wines I recommend.
There you go. That's fantastic. With all of the things that we've touched on, and I'll tell you, I've had a wonderful time. What is the main thing you would like people who either listen or watch to remember from this conversation or to take away?
Well, so if you were to go to my website, and it talks about my mission, which is to positively affect the life of each person I meet. And the way that I like to do that is laugh and learn. When I coined that phrase, or when I built that motto, if you will, it was because as a student and as a participant in training, I felt like I needed to be entertained to also learn. If it was just nothing but, hardcore education, I would lose interest, and maybe that's a me thing and not a all people thing. But as adults, I think we do feel like it's more memorable if I had a good time and I laughed and there was more than just the content, but there was also some attention to the delivery. Over time, that laugh and learn thing has taken on a more reverential role in my life, where maybe that's just good advice throughout life, is to ask yourself, did I laugh and did I learn? Lifelong learning is, to me, it's not an option. We can't stop anymore. I'm probably the first generation that did not get that option, that we have to continue to learn until we die, because the rapidity of technology adoption now is so fast that I can't say when I get 70, I can't say, you know what, I'm done with all this. I'm not going to do any of this new technology. Like my grandma never had a microwave and she was fine. My dad never had a cell phone and he was fine. We don't have that luxury. So for those of you out there listening to this, don't stop learning. You continue to learn, continue to find ways to learn, whether it's formalized through educational institutions or just as a hobbyist and enthusiast, reading or exploring things. Learning is living, right? And so is laughter. Laughter is whatever your beliefs are in divinity or spirituality, whatever that is, it came from that, because laughter is indeed the medicine for the soul. It is the best medicine. So I think now when I think of laugh and learn, I think that's kind of that's my roadmap to happiness. It's like if every day you laugh and every day you learn, that's a good day.
That is so fantastic. Dave, thank you so much for your time. I have loved this episode. I anticipate everybody who listens or watches will love this episode. Everybody, please remember, metacognition matters. If you want to know how to enjoy work more and how to find joy in your work, think about what you do, where you are, and how you can do more of it.
Exactly.
Thank you for listening to or viewing today's Engaged Company Culture episode. I hope you have enjoyed the episode. I hope you have learned something and have something that you can apply today to engage your company culture and encourage your employees to enjoy work, looking forward to Mondays instead of only looking forward to Fridays. If you liked this episode, please share it with someone else you know. Also, like and subscribe to Engaged Company Culture anywhere you listen to podcasts. Thank you and have a wonderful day.